Brilliant. There we go. Okay, so I haven't got an echo. Everything's good. All right, brilliant. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our weekly live stream where we have these incredible conversations as part of the Backyard Peace Project elite team of experts. We really talk about things that can be uncomfortable, can be confronting, but conversations that we feel like we need to be having, especially at the moment with everything going on in the world. It's really important to be having these deep and meaningful conversations and going beyond the superficial to something at the core that's meaningful and that can actually affect real change. So I never tell my beautiful team what we're going to be talking about, because every Wednesday I love to just land it on them, because then we get a really organic response and we have a really great conversation. So thanks so much for joining us. Good morning, lovely team. I hope you're all well. Good evening for you, Connie, because I know you're overseas. So thanks for joining us. So guys, as always, there's something been on my mind. I feel like it's affecting a lot of people in the world right now. And I feel like the rules around this have been blurred. So I have to find a space. I'm just going to mute you a minute, Steph. I can't do it. Why can't I mute you? Okay. Yeah, so I've been sort of grappling with this myself, and I feel like when I look out into the world, I think that there's been a blurring of the boundaries of what I'm going to talk about today, and I'd really love everybody's take on what the boundaries are and how we can honor ourselves and others. So what I'm going to say today is around speaking your truth. So morning, Paul. So there's this concept of speaking your truth, and I'm a great believer in that, because I feel like from a young age we're often silenced on what we want to express. We have to fit in, we have to do as are told, we have to follow some kind of authority. And so I do feel like most of my adult life has been trying to reconnect with myself and speak my truth. And there's no shock that I've had 2 throat surgeries, right? Because this is a big deal for me to be able to speak my truth. The throat chakra thing, I'm always banging on the old throat chakra music, because I'm like, this is an area that I'm constantly nurturing and constantly working on, is speaking my truth. But I feel like it's been taken in the world, and speaking your truth has been, in some cases, has become an excuse to just be brutal and just be just be cruel, and all of those sorts of things. And it's, oh, I'm speaking my truth, and I don't feel like that's what I believe speaking your truth is. And I also wanted to discuss Greer and Steph at the Osmompreneur Awards, so God bless them from coming on. Thanks, guys. Oh, and there's Pip as well. Yay, look at those 3 together. Oh, that's so cool. And I just want to mention that Greer won silver, and Steph and Pip got honourable mentions. So they've done brilliantly in the award. So congratulations, guys. So pleased and proud of you. Well done. You're on mute, darling, because you have to unmute. You have to unmute. Can you unmute, Steph? No. We'll come back to them. Yes, so I do feel, and I've encouraged my children to speak their truth. I think it's really important, even when it's going against what my husband and I have said. I've always encouraged them to question us, to have deep conversations with us, to get us to consider another point of view, etc., etc. So speaking your truth is very, very important to me. But has it been misunderstood, or has it been abused in society for just spouting out whatever's on your mind, no matter how it affects other people, etc.? And when should we use this or not? Because as I've said to you before, I've just had one of my friendships come to an end, and it was very loving and amicable, and the other person on the side of that friendship spoke their truth very articulately, and I chose not to, because I thought, is this helpful? Is it going to make any difference? Is it going to be useful in this? And so I decided not to speak every element of my truth in the situation that we were discussing, because I thought, what's the point? Like, is it going to help, or is it, you know, what is the intention here? So am I crazy? Is speaking the truth important? Are there times when you shouldn't speak your truth? Where's the line? Where are the boundaries? So this is what I really would love to discuss today.
I would like to jump in with one word. I'm going to add that to the lovely pile we will be creating here, and that is intention. That's the first thing that came up for me when you talk about speaking your truth, because I mean, speaking your truth, honesty is one of my highest value, and I've been, you know, on and on about it with the boys. You know, when the first little white lies come in and things about school or whatever, and I'm like, if you lie about the little things, what happens with the big things? I don't like it. I don't believe in little white lies. Lies are lies for me, and I understand there are situations where it's uncomfortable to speak the truth, and those situations for me are the ones where you need to think about, you know, is it important to say it, and what is your intention why you say it? Is it for you to be right? Is it for you to hurt the other person? Then both of these answers would be no, don't say it. If it is to stand up for yourself and to stand up for something that is important, and you are setting an example for your kids on top of that, then yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, the very first thing I want to throw in there is, what's your intention behind it when you speak your truth? And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sure there's more to say, but for now, I just want to give everybody else a chance as well. That was the first thing that came up. I wanted to share that.
One of the things that come to my mind is, I will ask myself, what is the consequence? What is the consequence of saying whatever you're saying? I will share with you, I've built pretty large teams in an organization, and at a time when the business was in trauma, I shared the truth of that with my team. And I have to say that they stepped up, they lifted, they supported, they guided me and the team. And so it proved to me the importance of being clear, of being transparent, for want of a better word. And I was questioned about us sharing that truth, because it was thought at one point, do the team actually need to know that the finances are pretty hard, pretty tight in the business at the moment? They might be worried that whether they're going to get paid or not. And I said, well, I would rather share it with kindness and love, but to seek support. And I was delighted to hear that they did. And so they were open to other ways that we could continue to build the business. And so from a business perspective, truth has always been something that is a hard yes for me.
But as well, Joanne, it comes down to what Marie said, is the intention was to empower the team, really.
Exactly.
And empower empower everybody in bringing the company forward. So that intention is beautiful.
Correct. Yes. So it wasn't an intention of scaring, frightening, any of that. It was, this is the journey we're on. We're all in this journey together. Let's work together. And how can we do this together? Because I've always found value in asking the team's perspective, slightly off topic, but not, because they hear the truth from a different perspective. They're at the front, they're the people answering the phone. There's the people talking to the customers. And what I perceive to be truth as being potentially up here, several floors higher, I don't see that. And so I wanted to give them the opportunity to share the truth with me reciprocally, so that we could make well-informed decisions in business. And so I think we need to allow our team to share their truth as well. Joanne, you said this is what we're going to do, but it's not working. And this is why it's not going to work, because we're at the front line of our business, of the business. So it has to go both ways.
So that's truth in integrity, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
Beautiful.
Just looking into, you know, just trying to piggyback on what Joanne was saying, like in business, if you build a team on that integrity, then it cuts out all the whispering and the, you know, the water cooler conversations where it turns into poison within the company. And, you know, people will jump out when it's the hardest. And if it's say it's a financial thing, or we need more work or whatever, the people that are doing the behind the scenes chit chat, they're going to jump ship as soon as it's uncomfortable, or they're not going to tell you and leave you in the lurch anyway. So the truth saying in a format where it's being honest and saying this is where we're at and this is where we're going, gives everybody space to make that decision before it's too late, for one, where the poison has gone through everybody's ears and, you know, there's the Chinese whispers going on. And then on the back of that, then gives people a buy-in, so some responsibility. It's like, okay, well, this is where we're at. We work as a team to, let's build it up. And that goes across, it's not just in business, it's in your family. It's in with your own conversations with yourself. So the truth saying is goes across every aspect. So I guess where Marie's saying and Joanne and we're all sort of looking at, it comes down to sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable, but then the conversation needs to be in a truth format where it's not spiteful or emotionally triggered. It comes to a place of, this is where we're at, let's just be honest with it, and then work from there. Because there's always going to be challenges and problems and things within every aspect of life. And so how do we enter into that space with a, I guess, connection of honesty and being brutal sometimes with that honesty, not brutal in a, you know, in a bad way, but brutal in, this is where we're actually at. So we need to do something about it. Let's work on that. Or even the honesty, it doesn't have to be about challenge. It could be, you know, I really love you and we want to have these good conversations. So let's work on that. So the truth is speaking your emotions in every way. Love, peace, challenge, trauma. It's the more we do this within ourselves, that throat chakra loosens up. For one, your energy opens up, your heart opens up, and your soul steps into that space of authenticity. Now, if we all come from that space, then the authentic human then allows the other person to be and gives them permission to be authentic. And it's felt before it's said. So if we could step into that space more often than not, or learn how to, I think it's an important part of evolution of humans.
I want to add two thoughts. One, I have been in businesses where those difficult conversations have had to be delivered by the higher level, C-level, whatever. And I've been in situations where it's been handled two different ways. So I've worked in an environment where we were treated like children, even though we were all very capable adults. And it really was very demeaning. And that actually caused more conversation, those water cooler conversations, because of how it was delivered. So that was very unfortunate, because now you have the higher level person having no buy-in. Okay, it was good. We knew how bad things were and what we needed to do. But yes, the way it was delivered was very demeaning. And it took a long time to get that trust back with that person, that, you know, we were all in this together as a team. Because I think a lot of people felt, you know, is my job threatened? Like, you know, what's my future? So I wanted to share that perspective, because I've been in that situation and it did not feel good at all. The other thing is I think that the environment we live in today, it's very easy to say whatever you want to say through a text, through an email, whether it be an online post. There's a lot of bravery out there that you probably the majority of the situations, if you were face to face with that person, you wouldn't say those things. And I think that's the unfortunate thing as well too, that we've lost something. You know, I always say to people, like, you just dropped off the thread. Like, if we were talking face to face, would you just leave the room and not end the conversation? So it's so funny how we just take this so lightly with all of the various avenues that we have to communicate these days. And you're so right, Cathy. You know, and I mean, everybody's right here. you know, what is the intention? Is the intention to hurt, or is the intention to inform? And yeah, and you know, I go back to, and I can't remember the person's name who said this, but think with your heart and feel with your mind. And, you know, if we start out thinking, how can I deliver this in a way that honors that person without tearing them down, but yet honors me as well too. And trust me, I'm not perfect at this. I missay things at times as well too, but that's where I do like text and email and all those things, because it gives me time to, okay, no, let's take that out. Let's redo that line. You know, it gives me an opportunity to go, how is this going to come across? Is this going to come across in a way that is meaningful and with the right intention? So I just wanted to share those thoughts.
I think I think it's also really important for us to remember that when we speak our truth, we're speaking our truth, and that may not be their truth. And when we leave space for that, that their truth is their truth, and that's cool. Our truth is simply our truth. Then there's no judgment applied to whoever's truth it might be. But if we aren't judging our own truth first, and again, like we talked about last week, coming at everything with curiosity. So that's my truth. What's your truth in that space? Because that old idea of, you know, there's always your truth, my truth, and then the truth, right? That different perspective. If we're just giving our truth as our truth, then it can be a lot easier to deliver, knowing that that other person may have a different truth to come back with.
Yeah, I love that, Philippa, because it's coming back to that piece that Marie was saying, is what is your intention? Is your intention to communicate, or is your intention to be right? And I do feel like a lot of people are trapped in that need to be right, to prove something about themselves, to prove that sort of wanting to be confident, wanting to be sure, and all of those sorts of things. But I do feel like the ultimate level of confidence is when I say confidence, and I don't know whether that's the right word, but like, for example, I give my kids the opportunity to audit our parenting and give us a score of 10, and that's really scary, because I'm like, if I don't get a 10, what's going on? Like, what are they going to give back to me? But I understand that their version of what happens in this house is different to my version of what happens in this house. And so being able to go, okay, I know I'm not perfect, as I said, don't tell Ian, and I know that we don't always get it right, but let me get the feedback, and let me find out areas that you feel aren't fair or that aren't working, and etc., because my version of what happens in this house is different to theirs. And so I think you're so right when you're saying that, understanding that everybody has their own truth, even if they've all experienced the same experience at the same time.
And if your children are giving you a 10 out of 10, I'd be super worried.
Yeah, I've always got areas to work on, Pip, don't worry.
Yeah. No, but then they don't actually feel like their feedback is taken with the intention that it's meant to be given, right? If the intention is to have the feedback so that you do better, and they're always giving you a 10 out of 10, do they trust that you're actually willing to do the work? So if you're getting a 10 out of 10 all the time, there's a problem. The fact that you're not, sorry about the noise, is a good thing.
I've never achieved a 10. I have to tell you, another parenting classic moment. Never. But as you say, it's good to have the feedback and go, oh, okay, I hadn't considered that. I'll adjust my approach, and I'm happy to do that. Even sometimes I'm like a bit grumpy about it because I'm tired, but I will do it. And they know that. That's good. But I think as well, speaking your truth can be terrifying. And I know that we've had situations where I think that many, many years ago, there was an institution that delivered prejudice treatment to one of my children because of their diagnoses, and very blatantly. I mean, it wasn't up for discussion. It was very blatant discrimination. And I cried for a week after that. I was absolutely devastated that my precious little sweetheart was completely rejected by the institution that had promised to help and nurture. And, we'd been in comms with them all the way through. And at the very last minute, once they got the official report through, they withdrew everything and went against all of their policies to get rid of us, basically. And so with that, I decided to take it further not for us, but for the next family that was going to go through them. Because they'd made it totally, there was no way in hell I could have sent my child there. They made it perfectly clear that my child was not welcome. And so the reason I pursued it, and we went to the Education Department and the Human Rights Commission, was for the next family to go through their doors, not for us. But I have to tell you guys, I really, really struggled to speak our truth on that occasion. And I found it just very distressing and pretty terrifying to go to these big institutions and stand. But there was the two things were that for the next family that were going to go through those doors, I wanted to try and smooth the way for them, who had similar circumstances to us. And also my kids were watching, you know, and I felt my duty was to speak, because I wanted them to know you matter. You have an equal place in this world to anybody else. And we are not going to stay silent when somebody tries to shove us aside because we're not convenient to them. But I was a wreck the whole time. Like I really was. I every time I spoke, the poor people that were dealing with me, every time I spoke to them, I cried. And I'm British, like I don't cry. Do you know what I mean? But every time I got so emotional because I was so distressed. The whole situation was so traumatic. That I was really, they were brilliant. The people that helped me were absolutely fantastic. They were so sympathetic. They were so compassionate. But it took for me to threaten to go to the press for the actual institution to respond. And that would have been the ultimate speaking of truth. But speaking your truth is not always easy. Silence. Yeah, I'll shut you all up now. There you go. But what I'm trying to say is,
moment. We had to let this sink in.
Sorry, darling. Sorry. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there who are scared to speak their truth. And I totally relate to that. But there are times when really we need to push through that. And again, comes back to intention. What is my intention here? My intention is to communicate this is not okay. The way you've treated this person, yes, she was small, but she was still a person with full rights as anybody else. And the way that went down was wrong, and something needed to be said and done about it. And I honestly didn't want to be the one to do it. I felt exhausted. I felt vulnerable. I felt distressed. I felt scared. But I did it because of that bigger vision, that bigger intention of somebody's got to speak. And I'll tell you where that comes from. I don't know whether I've told you this story before, Pete. I'm sorry if I have. In a nutshell, I was 18 years old, stood outside the bank. A blind man was walking down the road, and I knew he was going to go into the lamppost. And I stood waiting for somebody else to speak up and stop him because I was so scared to use my voice at that age because of things that had gone on in my childhood. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be heard. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to stand out in any way. I wanted to just blend into the background. And I was watching this guy who was blind with his stick. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to hit that lamppost. And he did. He went straight into the lamppost, full pelt. And I felt sick to my stomach. And from that moment, the worst moment of my life that I'm totally ashamed of, that was the moment I decided I would always speak. In the future, I would always speak. And I always have. But it is, I mean, I'm better at it now, but when I was exercising that muscle for the first time, it was pretty brutal. Like it was like feeling sick, shaking hands, like I was on the, it was like a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response when I was doing it.
I think you just hit the nail on the head there, Cathy, in that often when we don't speak, or often when we do, it's because of those unconscious core beliefs, right? The patterning that we have, what was acceptable for us when we were little, and we sit in that space of this is what this is what my nervous system will allow to keep me safe. And if we haven't moved past that, rewritten that, then our nervous system is declaring what's okay for us and what's not. And that's where the real work happens, right? Is in rewriting that to be appropriate for who you are today versus what worked for you when you were 2 and 3 and 5 and 7. And that's, again, that's where the choice you made to never be silent again, that's that's what we all have to do, right? We all have to choose who we're going to turn up as an adult. Are we going to let the 5-year-old run the show, or are we going to take charge and do the work and be the person that we want to be, as opposed to the person we were parented to be?
Mm.
I think there's so much to be said about, like, when you have an opinion, or I want to call it my truth, like my personal example, you know, my truth was that I absolutely believe that you can heal through grief, that this is not something that will stay with us forever. And my favorite way to explain that is always like that. I say, I treat grief like a visitor, not like a permanent resident. Yeah, she every now and then comes, knocks on the door. Sometimes I'll sit with her. Sometimes we chat. Sometimes we cry. We laugh. Sometimes joy comes in and the three of us share stories. That's how I like to express that. That's how I treat grief. This was my truth after Rob died, my husband died. And this was a truth that I wanted for the kids, for our kids, to adopt and grow up with as well. This is something that Rob and I had decided. So to me, that was my absolute truth, because that's what we had chosen, not knowing that it would ever happen, but it did. So for me to stand there and say that into a world where everybody tells you that this will last forever, this will stay with you forever, it's like the scarlet letter, basically, you know, you're a widow now, your life is over. And I stood up for that, and I stood even, you know, a step up higher when I did my TEDx talk about the redefining our image of a widow, where I talked about these truths that we have and society's expectation. And that was really big for me. And I remember how scary that was for me to stand up, because I truly thought that I was the only one believing that in that moment. And here's the reason why I'm sharing that. Once we stand up for our truth and we actually speak it out into the world, not only do we speak it into existence, but we also realize that once we say it, then the next person pops up, and the next person, and the next person. Oh, I feel like that too. Oh, that happened to me as well. And I thought I was the only one in that. And all of a sudden I found my new circle and my new circles, and it's growing bigger and bigger. And now I'm in this network of people who work in the space of grief, who believe the same thing, that we can heal that we don't have to have grief define us in a way that our life is over. We can actually let it define us in a more powerful way, in a standing more in our truth way, in, you know, let's not, I'm not going to swear here, with life, like, let's not mess with life. We just want to create a life that is worth loving. And that to me was a really big thing, because it was super scary. And now I have to quickly hug my son because he's doing his HSC. Excuse me.
Good luck. Good luck. Yeah, I do feel that what concerns me slightly is watching certain groups online where people are very attached to their own truth, but then dictating terms to other people and what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, with very little context about the life of the other person. And I mean, I know there's a lot of practitioners, all of us are practitioners online. We're all coaching people, we're all helping people, we're all experts in that area. And never do we tell our clients what to do. What we do is guide them to their own answers, right? And so it really does concern me. And I do feel it's starting to dismantle, because I think people are starting to see beyond the veil here and see that this isn't a healthy thing. Like, if you're going to be in a community, be in a community like the Backyard Peace Project, which is full of experts who have expertise in this area, and whose intention, coming back to intention, is for you to find and unfold your greater good, which isn't the same as somebody else's greater good. And I mean, I was interviewed the other day on a podcast, and they were asking me about being a mother of kids who were diverse. And they were asking me about that as a general concept. And I said, I can only speak to my experience in my family. I cannot speak to anything beyond that. So I said, I just want to really make that clear, that when I speak, it's from personal experience. I'm not an expert in this area by any means. I'm an expert on my children. That's what I'm an expert on. I'm not an expert on the condition. I'm not an expert on the experiences of so many different people, because everybody's unique and different, and everyone's going to experience things in a different way. But I think unless you've got that awareness yourself, then your truth, coming back to Philippa's point, becomes the truth that you want everybody to follow. And that's when it gets a bit sticky.
I agree. I think for me, it is when you talk about it in the sense of how you raised your kids, what you did, and how you dealt with the challenges that you had, it becomes inspiration. You know, your truth becomes inspiration, and that's the exact path that I chose in a space of grief. You know, I wanted my truth not to be everybody's truth, but to be an inspiration when you feel you're stuck in something that you shouldn't be stuck in, and you want to experience joy, but everybody tells you that ain't gonna happen anymore. You know, like here's my thing: like everybody knows that we can experience all emotions in one day. But then after somebody dies, and all of a sudden only the negative ones are valid. How's that possible? You know, this is absolutely impossible. So for me, it is my truth. It is what I stand up for. It is what I wanted our kids to grow up with. And in that, standing in my truth, I was very lucky to inspire thousands of others, and realized that there was a whole community out there, and a community that I founded, and then, you know, found more and more people that were aligned with that. And I feel if we all do that, if we all stand up for our truth with the intention to inspire, then, you know, we've already done like a most amazing thing to start a ripple effect around the world. And as you said, Cathy, it's exactly what we are doing in the Backyard Peace Project. Everybody is in there to share their truth with the intention to inspire, to heal, to help, to support. And that's what I love so much about this community.
I recently had somebody comment on some of the things that I post on Facebook, and they said, it's so interesting because your posts are never, you should do this, or this is what you should follow. And they said, like, you're always providing perspective, your experience, but you're never dissing or, you know, saying that something that somebody's following is wrong or bad. And it's interesting because I guess it's the way I write. Even when I'm writing a blog, I'm never saying you should do this. I'll say, in my experience, I've found that my clients have benefited from this. You know, in my own situation, like I'll talk more about or, you know, situations of what my clients have experienced. And I think that that's part of it as well too. You know, the you is sort of the finger pointing when you're, you know, writing anything, a post or whatever it is. And I think that that's also part of it as well too. Again, it's another medium, and you know, we can be very brave in using these mediums to point fingers or say that something's wrong, as opposed to just leaving it as a perspective. This is what I've experienced, or this is what I follow. And, you know, it's up to you whether you want to follow it or not. And you're right, Cathy, like with my clients, being a nutritionist, I'm not there to slap the food out of somebody's hand. You know, all I can do is guide them. I can give them an excellent meal plan, but I'm here to provide support on those really challenging days where, you know, they've decided to sit down and, you know, comfort eat or emotionally eat. And okay, let's break this down. You know, I'm not going to point fingers and say you failed. Let's break this down. How can we maybe mitigate that process the next time that this happens? Maybe we need to have some tools in place, but I can't stop the process. I mean, gosh, the days that I'm really stressed, you know, I'm like, what can I have? What can I have? And then I go, okay, what do you tell your clients? Okay, let's, you know, maybe let's take a stretch. Let's have some water. I know how difficult it is. So if I've got somebody who's used food to comfort themselves from past traumas, that takes a long time to change. I can't just say stop, you know. So anyway, you know, just wanted to share that yeah, we have to do it from our perspective. We have to stop finger pointing.
I want to tap in briefly, if I can, to Marie, your story. 25 years ago, I was in the same situation. I became a widow unexpectedly. And I'll be clear, my husband was HIV positive and he committed suicide. So I was told by the family not to tell anyone, that it was too shameful. And so that was a truth that I had to hold for a good while. And I found it affected my health. Holding something I wanted to talk about, I needed to share with, I didn't tell my parents. My father never knew. He passed away 20 years ago. So holding the lie or not telling the truth will affect your physical being. There is no doubt about it. And I will say to you that the time I started talking about it was physically releasing for me. And so I think you have to think about the consequence of not telling the truth. How do you hold that? And you mentioned, Marie, that your son's just sitting his HSV, right? My daughter at 16, a week before her end of year exams in grade 12, asked me what happened. And so I felt that I needed to tell her. It was the worst time to tell her in readiness for her end of school exams. She did thrive, but she asked, so I shared. And I told her the truth. And so from that journey on, I started telling more. But we have to consider the impact that it has when others force things on us, or we allow it to be forced on us. The impact that it will have on us physically can be profound.
I totally agree with you there, Joanne. And I'm sure Philippa will, because Philippa and I do very similar work in different fields, or meadows, as I'd like to say. But I had a session with a client the other day, and there was a fundamental truth that while she was sharing, and she's in a very dark place at the moment. And when I work, I do channel a lot. I do have a lot of stuff come through me. And this one phrase came through me again and again and again while she was talking. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Yeah, but not now. I'm holding space. And, and it got to the end of the session, and Pip will really relate to this. It was I matter. I matter. And we got to the end of the session, and I said, look, can we dance with this, please? And at first she couldn't say the words. She couldn't say the words. And I've got goosebumps telling you. And we got towards the end of the session, and by the end of the session, she was shouting very powerfully these words. And I have to tell you guys, I've never, ever done this in a session before with a client, because I am very professional. But tears were streaming down my face. I wasn't crying, like I didn't lose it, but I could not stop the tears, because this was such a profound truth that had been denied this person for such a long time. And for her to step into that, I couldn't stop it. I'm British. I'm like, what is going on? My face is leaking, but I couldn't stop. Like the profoundness of that moment of something so fundamental was life-changing for both of us, because I've never, ever felt the power of a moment, especially virtually, because I work virtually, so deeply. And her speaking her truth was electric. And it was such a simple and yet not simple truth, because a lot of people go around thinking that they don't matter, and they do sacrifice everything for everybody else and all those sorts of things. And her speaking her truth, and like by the end, she was like belting it out. And I was swearing, while I am in session. I've got a potty mouth, terrible. Make sure the kids are at the end of the house. But we were just like really rocking it. And that was life-changing for her. Something massive shifted in her in that moment. So I totally agree with you, Joanne. It takes a physical toll on our bodies if we are not being truthful to ourselves.
I also want to say, Joanne, thank you so much for sharing. I really, really appreciate that, because I understand how hard that sometimes is to talk about something like that. And with any and every case of suicide that I've dealt with, as in client side, and then sharing the story, it always, literally 100% of the time, went hand in hand with shame. There was always this, what could I have done to save him or her? What could I have done differently? And there's instantly that feeling of guilt that comes in, and guilt and shame and grief, you know, they're quite strongly related. And that is another thing that I'm very big on, that we need to break through this, that we need to share our truth in all of that. And that takes so much courage, because it has to come through that, bypassing that, or walking through that stigma, that shame, the guilt and all of that comes with it, and the not speaking up about things. I had many times in the work that I'm doing as, you know, in the coaching space, as well as in the parenting, as well as with my own story, where when I couldn't come to the truth, when I couldn't get to this point where, like, what is it that needs to be released, that I could feel the buildup. And everybody knows that feeling when you feel like you need to cry but you can't, and then it becomes this painful knot in your throat. And then I mean, I have my go-to tools, and I'm going to mention it again. Paul, you know, he comes to my house every Tuesday. We do breath work together, and it has become my absolute must. Like, it's my you know, my release point. When I can't do it on my own, then I always do it in the breathwork session. But I've learned my tools, you know. And worst case scenario, when I can't get to anything else, I watch the movie My Girl, and I'm bawling every time when she walks down the stairs to the funeral, and I'm just sobbing uncontrollably. I laugh about it now, but it has become my go-to when I feel that tension. And that is even just, and I put it under huge quotation marks, one little thing that I just can't get to. I don't know what it is, or I don't have time to cry. You know, we know all, like, what that's like when we're busy moms and parents. Sorry, Paul. So there is this moment of taking time to allow that to come up, and then taking the time to release it. Because if you don't, it really hurts physically. You really do physical harm to yourself. So yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Joanne.
Steph?
Totally. We've got three of our authors on here. I was just going to say, you all together, and you're three of my authors in the anthology that we're just about to publish. And every single story in that anthology is electric and so powerful. And what we've been doing over the last 2 weeks is filming sound bites and filming the interviews ready to go into the promo for the book. And every single time, it's been so palpably, is that a word? Powerful. It's really so strong, because these three authors on this call here, Philippa, Greer, and Steph, they've all been really vulnerable and courageous with their chapters. It's stories that people need to hear. Like, we need to hear authentic, raw stories right now. And every single story, every chapter in this book is life-changing and life-saving. I genuinely believe that. I could not be prouder of this project. And like, guys, when we've done our interviews together, it has been super powerful, super electric. Like, you can feel the energy coming through the words. And every single one I do, I'm energized by the, you know, I've done a lot of interviews in the last 2 weeks. Like, I've been like, oh my God, back to back to back. And each time I'm freshly energized, because the ripple of power going through those words is incredible. And guys, you've shared really vulnerable stories in this book.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, this is actually so fitting. Just hearing Joanne talk about her husband and the shame and the silence, that was my story as well. My diagnosis of Parkinson's, the very first person I spoke to were my parents, and my mum immediately said, well, we can't tell anybody about this. So for 9 years, I had to hold on to that as shame. And yeah, so yeah, it's huge to be able to actually finally release that. And very similar to what you just went through as well, Cathy, with your client. I shouted the words, and they came out so loud and messy, but yeah, it physically, it hurt, but it was such a huge release. Yeah, just I'd jump in with that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, sorry, I'll take a breath.
But it's powerful. It's powerful sharing your story, you know, and there's been a lot of the authors have never told this story before in this book. you know, and it's a powerful book. Like, I'm really, really proud of it. Like, I do feel it's going to change lives. I feel like it's just energetically, the vibration of that book is so high. Like, it's such a beautiful, steeped in love, steeped in the intention of connection and understanding and compassion and healing. You know, it's so important for us to tell our stories.
When we tell our stories, though, we create the opportunity for others to feel seen, and not everyone is ready to do the telling of their story. But when we are, and we can, and we do, other people are seen in their own story. And that's a really powerful thing, I think.
Absolutely. And that's, I guess, going back to what Philippa said back, and everyone's impact in the words that are coming through and what experiences that we're sharing here, brings it back to trying to unpack it in my mind, because there's so much goodness that's coming out of this. The polarity, coming back to the truth, your truth, their truth, and the truth. And then within that space, it's like, well, who made up the truth in the first place? So it brings into a polarity space of bringing compassion and understanding to each other, that everyone has their own experience. And with everyone's story and their journey and everything we've been through, and the authors and their story. And not only that, but as coaches and presenters and all that, when we get up and tell a story, it's like when you read a book, people go into their experience. And so they're going into their truth and picking out the pieces that relate to them or maybe trigger them. And again, it's us being able to hold space for people to be triggered, but then to unpack the trigger, or to be excited and inspired to be able to unpack that and to create from there. And the necessity in the planet right now, and as humans, is that space of the speaking of the truth is giving people permission to actually be real. And sometimes people have held on to their truth for so long, again, physical elements, but then the emotions that come with that. It's like, sometimes the people have been sitting on anger and rage and frustration for so long that sometimes, like we said at the start, it might be a spitfire conversation or spitfire word that comes out, but it's that truth, but it's loaded with the emotion within that space. And sometimes this is where the growth, and I guess as for us, is to hold space for people to allow it out and shout out that they are powerful, they are worthy, they are amazing humans, but also their truth needs to come out and hold that space to give them enough room, and as Maria's saying, get enough space within our physical body to release the emotion, because we've been holding on. It's stuck in cells, it's cell memory, it's in our nervous system, and we don't give ourselves enough space to release that. We don't move enough or breathe well. And that's like, a lot of my work is about retraining people how to breathe through emotion and ideas and expansion on their life and what they can actually step into. And everything that everybody's saying here, and we've all been through challenge and experiences at some form. And the integrity and the intention that comes behind who we are as humans allows everybody that permission to step up and to step into their own power by owning the truth, even if it's against someone else's truth, but it's owning yours because you've experienced something different to someone else. Someone likes an apple and someone doesn't like an apple, but that's their experience and their truth. So there's no point in arguing about it. It's like what Connie was saying, it's like, get into a space where I'm just sharing my experience, and then you take from it what you take from it. And it allows a neutral space if people have or give themselves permission to be able to feel what it feels like and step back for enough time to check in with the body, check in with the emotion, and check in with their truth, rather than just blurting out the first thing that comes to mind, because it's backed by a huge emotion that's been sitting in their body for 20 years. So to bring it into simplicity and try to encapsulate this for anyone who's listening and going through this now, how do we bring in that polarity? How do we bring in, I guess, a truth understanding if it doesn't agree with us, if it's going against our own integrity of what we believe? And And I still struggle with this at times, because a big value of mine is integrity. You do what you say and you say what you do. And then when you come against people in business, in relationships, in just life, where they just deceive and you know, say one thing like what you went through, Cass, with your big experience, they've followed up and then the last minute pull the pin, and it's a huge thing. No wonder you were a mess afterwards, because there's so much integrity coming from you, because your power is your family, and what you're stepping into is going beyond what is, it's a bigger vision. And if we can all hold a bigger vision for humanity, it's going to be hard, it's going to be challenging, and we're going to be faced with our own internal dialogues of truth and belief and emotions that come up within our body. And if we can all share, and all the tools that we have on this stage is to give everybody space to just breathe a little less, a little more, or to release through the emotions or through the stories and the experience, gives everybody that space to go, have a cry, have a laugh, move your body, go and do life in your own way, but also connect to other people and tell your story in a loving way, and in integrity, and with intention of uplifting the world into a better space. And this is where we go beyond the systems and become human. And I think it's so, so important right now with everything. And there's always something going on, but there seems to be an explosion of life in the planet and in the people and the systems and the experience and the emotions, that it's a prime time to step into the challenge and have a look at it with support of the Backyard Peace Project. I think is the platform to, not the only one, but it's there. The mission behind it is there for that reason. And I love it. And like, everyone's experience and everyone's words and everyone's knowledge is so powerful and impactful, and coming from that space of love. And I think that's where people feel it in the story, on the stage, in your conversations, in your coaching, in your books. And I think it's so important to keep that as honest and real within your truth, and allowing others to speak theirs, even if they don't like yours. And that's where you own it in your own feeling sense, and your body thrives from that. And you breathe better, you move better, you think better, you feel better, then flows on to the rest of your life and everyone around you, because your energy goes out first before you show up. So important.
Interesting, isn't it? That so often, I think, as mothers, we tend to take on, and I'm not a dad, so I can't speak to that, but I know a lot of the mothers that I work with, they talk about this, you know, they feel so totally responsible for everybody around them's feelings, right? And in many ways, as mothers, we are. The way we are in ourselves impacts everyone within our sphere. Like we do, that's our job, and that's okay. But what we don't tend to do is stop that at our front door. We tend to then take that into the rest of the world and assume responsibility for everybody else's emotions as well, which is so not our shit. Like, it's not. And when we get to say, you know, I choose to know that's actually not my shit, that's their shit, and leave it with them, then our truth becomes easier to share, because it really is our truth. Now, with our kids, we've got to take responsibility to do our stuff so that we are impacting them positively and that we have the right energy for them. But everybody else, that's theirs. And if we can stop taking responsibility for how everybody else interacts with our truth, then we can, we're only responsible for our stuff, and the rest can just go.
Philippa, I want to honour about what you just said, and Paul as well, what you said. And Philippa, just to add to that, I agree with everything you said there. And here's how I find it appearing in the sessions that I do with my clients. It comes through as, this is silly, but this is how I feel. And I'm like, it's not silly. Like, everything you bring into a session is totally relevant. There is nothing that you could share with me that's going to be defined as silly by me. Everything that comes through you to share is relevant and important. But I feel like in those realms where we are sort of these facilitators of, you know, emotional harmony, we often suppress our own. We often sort of neglect ourselves and put our things to the side. And I've just explained to you last week how, you know, with the whole cabinet, cleaning the cabinet, I haven't sent you photos yet, I will. But, you know, the whole shame around the cabinet, because I'd set it aside, it's because I felt that the emotional and mental cleanliness of my kids was better than the house, right? That was what I needed to prioritize at the time. But I didn't realize I had so much shame around it. I really didn't. And so it's so important. And like the other week I was working with a client overseas, and for 20 minutes I didn't say a word. Shocking, I know. Ian will never believe it. But 20 minutes I didn't say a word. I just held the space, and this client went through every single emotion you could possibly imagine, with tears and expression of big feelings. And all I did was hold the space, because when do we get that? Especially when we're running businesses, especially when we've got so many responsibilities, especially when we're showing up for a lot of people. When do we get, you know, without saying, oh no, don't cry, or no, don't say that, or no, that's not it. And I remember once, years and years ago, I was going through a bit of a tricky time. I was still living in England. It's about 20 years ago. And I remember just some days, guys, I just want to wallow. Some days I just want to feel sorry for myself. I want to be a little bit dramatic. I sometimes will throw myself around the furniture dramatically. I might do this and ask somebody to bring me a drink. I don't know. But some days I like to have those days of just being in all of the feelings. And I remember sharing it with a friend once, and well, we're no longer friends, but she was like, oh God, you just got to think positive. Like, you got to be, and I'm like, I'm the most motherfucking positive person you'll ever meet. But today I'm wallowing. Do you know what I mean? So just allowing everybody to experience the whole thing is okay. We don't have to be switched on all the time. We don't have to be perfect all the time. We just need that. But I remember once crying in front of a friend, and she sort of patted me on the back and said, never do that again. And what did I do? Shut it down. Can't do that, can't be vulnerable, can't cry, can't bleed over everybody, you know. And it was just one moment, and she went, yeah, I'm glad you're feeling better, but never do that with me again. And I was like, wow, okay, now I've completely redefined what our friendship is. Do you know what I mean? But when do we get the chance to just sit for 20 minutes and work our way through all of these emotions that we've been suppressing? Because, as you said, Marie, you know, I've had days where I've had massive grief for my dad, and it's super inconvenient. I'm like going into a meeting. So I'm like, I need to just, you know, snap out of this grief, but I will hold space for it later. And I'll watch my favorite film to cry to. Do you know what I mean? Because I do believe you need to express this stuff.
And that's a key sentence, what you just said, you know, and that's what it comes back to in everything I do, the holding space. You know, we really need to learn to hold space for other people. And we are, as moms, as coaches, we are in this, we want to heal, we want to help, we want to fix, we want to support, we want to da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the number one thing we need to do is hold space.
Can we take
Everything
that
else
back?
can come later.
Yeah, can we take
In
that
that
back?
space. But if the space is not there, then nothing can happen, and no healing can happen, and no learning, no expressing. And sorry, Pip, I didn't want to cut.
No, sorry, I cut you off.
No.
If we take that right back to childhood, though, how many of us were parented based on how well our parents could hold space for our big emotions? You know, we've been at this beautiful conference, been lovely, and I've been holding this little baby because I always find the baby to cuddle. And people keep walking past me saying, oh, she's such a good baby. No, there are no bad babies. She's a contented baby because her mum is able to hold space, and she's you know, she's got all this beautiful energy around her, and people feel comfortable and confident. But there are no bad babies. And so much of the way we parent is around behavior, which is actually just emotional release without communication, right? So when they don't have the ability to communicate with words, they communicate with behavior. And then we parent the shit out of that the wrong way. And we say, well, that's not okay. And so we just put them all in this little box, and we go, well, you can't have that emotion because I'm not comfortable with it. And that's where behavioralist parenting comes from, right? Rather than relationship. And so if we actually can go back and think about how we're parenting and what this behavior might be meaning, because even with teenagers who do have words, often they're still learning how to process that emotion, so it comes out in behavior. But we're so busy shutting down everything that feels fucking uncomfortable, and so and then nobody gets to do anything uncomfortable, and everybody's standing around holding all the shit. When somebody feels confident enough in me and comfortable enough with me to let loose and give me all their stuff, I feel proud. I feel honored that they were comfortable enough with me to do that. I will never shut that down. And I don't care who it is, but we need, as a community, as a culture, to learn how to do the uncomfortable shit. And it's not going to the gym. Sorry, that's just not me. But, you know, there's uncomfortable that we're okay with because it's culturally okay to be uncomfortable in that space. But if we could start to see the joy and the benefit of being uncomfortable with our emotions, we would be far better off as a community. Soapbox moment over.
And also, I want to bring it back to what Cathy said last, I believe it was last week when we had this, because there is this, okay, what Pip just said, you know, I'm here for you, I'll hold space for you. And then our kids sit there and go like, and I'm like, okay, oh, do you want me to give you feedback? Do you want me to just sit and listen? You know, the asking, what do you actually want me to do? You know, and I think as much as we need to learn to hold space more than we do now, way more, then also ask what do you want after that, or what do you want in that space? Do you just want me to hold that, aka listen, be there, witness, be present, or do you want me to take you further? And I'm going to share one super quick example of my younger son, who came to me one day and he said, you know how you always say, you support me no matter what? And I said, yeah. He said, you know, with the whole, what am I going to do with school and where am I going? And you know, am I staying? Am I leaving in year 10? Am I doing 8 or non-8 or what? I said, yeah. And he said, well, I need you to do more than that. I need you to give me advice. And I'm like, stop the press. My son is asking me for advice. He was born, we always called him Mr. I Do It, because he said it from when he could talk. He would always say it twice. That's how important it was to him. Don't step in. I do it. It was always, you know, so it sort of became this running gag in our family that he never wanted support. But I wanted him to know that I'll be there and I'll back him up no matter what, until he came to me and said, I need you to do more than that. I need advice. And I'm like, awesome. I've got it right here. Do you want to hear it now? And he said yes. And we sat down and had the most beautiful conversation about his future. And I'm like, wow. He still made his own decisions and had to come a long loop around to find where he wants to go. But he's got such conviction. And he just knows where he wants to go and who he wants to be. And I couldn't be prouder. He's 15. So I'm like, wow. But yeah.
For you to be able to hold the space for him to know I can have this deep conversation with mum and still make my own decision, and that's okay. You know, that's really important. And coming back to Paul's point about the truth, something that I've learned over the years parenting my children is understanding what their truth is in a situation and responding from that place, not my interpretation of what the truth is. Right? Because we've got very different experiences of things. And, you know, so many things can be true simultaneously. And, you know, there's times when I've had to manage between my kids of them going, but this happened and this happened and this was unacceptable and blah, blah, blah. I said, all that is true. But, and if you see what he's experienced that day and you see what's contributed to that reaction and you see, you know, how he's feeling in that moment, then that's his truth of how he's experienced it because of this, that, and the other. So it's so complex. And I think as well, to add to what you're saying, Philippa, I get it, because I was one day where my daughter, she won't mind me saying, my eldest, she was going off, like she was going nuts. And I was just cooking dinner. She wasn't going nuts at me, but she was going nuts at me. She was expressing all of this anger and she was just like shouting at me and she's telling me this and she's telling me that. And I'm just chopping carrots, man. I'm just like, I'm here for the whole thing. I'm just putting the things on and putting the dinner in the oven. And like kids would come out from the corridor and I'd be like, and then they just like white shadow it back into the abyss. But at the same time, if that's constantly the behavior, then you're like, I'm not here for that. Do you know what I mean? Like now and again, yeah, I'll hold this space, but I'm not constantly here for that. That's not my role here. So I think there's also leaning into your intuition of, I've been in friendships where that's all I got. And I was like, yeah, this isn't a friendship. This is free therapy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not up for that. This is, you know, got to be a bit more discerning. So yeah, it's something to be aware of. So guys, look, we could talk about this all day. I've just realized what the time is. I'm super mindful of where you are and everything. So has everybody got anything that they'd like to say closing off on this?
Thank you.
I wanted to add a really good book. It really is about people holding in their truth or holding in what they've felt or were scared to say, by Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No.
Mm.
It took me so long to read that book because I had to digest every single story. And for people who don't know, he, well, very proud, he's a Vancouverite, where I live. But he was the head of the hospice here in Vancouver, and he interviewed people who were dying and wanted to understand their stories of their lives. And in every situation, the people that he interviewed, these were people who had held something all of their life, either something that had happened or they felt that they weren't allowed to speak up in certain situations. And every one of them ended up with a terminal disease. So not saying that that happens in every case, but it really was a book that for me just really struck me as to how important it is. And that's why, you know, like you say, it's such an honor to get people to the point where they trust you with their story and they start to open up. And this book made me really realize that I needed to do that as a coach, that I needed to give them that space to be able to talk about what happened.
Beautiful. And just on an extra point there, Connie, if ever you want me to fly, if ever you want to fly me out to Vancouver to hit food out of your hand, I'm here. I'm here for it. Just letting you know. Just give me like 2 weeks notice.
Well, I always threaten to go live with my clients for a little while, or you know, they can just do the food journal on the app that I use, and all of them opt for the app. They don't want me to come live with them.
I'm just imagining the horror of meeting you in a supermarket aisle. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh shit, yes, it's for a friend. I'm shopping for a friend.
I have had
Probably not mine.
yeah, I have had clients run into me, and it's just like. No judgment. Like, yeah, I don't judge. I'm not perfect. I love all those.
You're perfectly imperfect, like all of us, darling. It's like bumping into your hairdresser on a bad day, like, oh, really? Couldn't you have seen me yesterday? For God's sake. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for a brilliant session. Thanks, guys, for coming in from Geelong. Whoop, whoop. Thank you so much. That's amazing.
What Greer was trying to say was that you also got an honourable mention.
I did indeed. Thank you so much. Yes, it was lovely to be acknowledged, considering, you know, we've put so much into the Backyard Peace Project, all of us, for the last, I don't know, 8 months. So to get that acknowledgement at the awards was really pretty special, because we've all built something really special. So thank you, and congratulations to all three of you. That's amazing. I think I've got a little bit of FOMO, but whatever, I'm moving on. All right, guys, thank you so much.
Don't have a hangover as well.
No hangover. Yeah. All right, so I will stop live streaming and we will see you next time.